No, swearing in.
Swearing in. I apologize. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you are about to give in the matter now pending before this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Thank you. Tonight we're going to be hearing petition number 874. This is a petition of Dos Quadras Offshore Resources, LLC, DCOR, for an interim variance from APCD Rule 29C, conditions on permits, violation of permit conditions. Would each of you please tell us your names and what you do for Dos Quadras?
Yes, my name is Christine White. I'm an environmental advisor for DCOR.
Thank you.
I'm Robert Garcia. I'm the operations manager for DCOR.
Thank you, sir.
And I'm Emily Homan, facility engineer for DCOR.
Thank you. Would you like to present your petition?
Yeah, I'll start out and then other members will follow along.
Please do.
Good evening, hearing board members. Thank you for being here tonight to hear our petition for an interim variance. DCOR filed both interim and regular variances on July 27th, 2017, just after learning that an enclosed ground flare at our Mandalay onshore facility, and I'll just refer to it as Mandalay going forward, located in Oxnard, California, just south of the NRG power plant on the beach in Oxnard there. So our enclosed ground flare was found during a emission source test that was conducted June 13th to be slightly above the permitted NOx emission levels. And I say slightly, the limit is 0.06 pounds per MMBTU, and what we measured was 0.076 pounds per MMBTU. So the flare is operated to combust tail gas or waste gas from our natural gas treatment system, or it's an amine plant located at the facility. Do you want me to wait or?
Come on.
I'd like to say that on the steering, but being as I missed, I don't know how much.
No, you haven't.
You only missed about 2 minutes.
We just started. We waited
Oh, so sorry.
and waited and waited.
Well, we'll have her start over,
Okay.
so you won't miss anything.
Dr. Stephen Herlock, our fourth of 5 board members.
Okay, I'll briefly start over again. Christine White, I'm an environmental advisor for DCOR. This is Bob Garcia, he's the operations manager for DCOR, and Emily Homan, and she is a facility engineer for DCOR. And just so you know, in the audience we have 2 more DCOR employees. On the left is Scott Knight, he's the environment, safety, and environmental regulatory compliance manager. And on the right is Claire Crocker. She's just joined us as an air compliance coordinator, fresh from Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo, environmental engineer. So we're happy to have her. So, So DCOR filed both interim and regular variances on July 27th, 2017, just after learning that our enclosed ground flare at our Mandalay onshore facility, located in Oxnard, California, just adjacent to the NRG power plant, it was found during a emission source test to be slightly above the permitted NOx emission limit. And I say slightly, the limit's 0.06 pounds per MMBTU, and we tested at 0.076 pounds per MMBTU. The flares operated to combust tail gas from our natural gas treatment system, otherwise known as an amine plant located at the facility. The amine plant removes H2S and CO2 from natural gas so that it can meet the Southern SoCal Gas Company, or PUC, Public Utilities Commission, gas sales specifications. DECOR is requesting that you approve tonight an interim variance to authorize the continued operation of the flare in the tail gas mode with the excess emissions until some gas piping additions can be made at the facility. The piping additions will allow the shutdown of the entire amine plant, including the operation of the amine reboiler and the flare while operating in the tail gas mode. So until these additions can be made, the operation of this flare is required for continued oil and gas production on Platform Gilda and Platform Gina. It generates DECOR approximately $70,000 a day in revenue and allows the employment of 40 hourly workers at the facilities and then 3 office positions. In addition to this, we also have contractors and suppliers of equipment and food, and that also generate income off of the operations at these facilities. So at Mandalay, DECOR processes and also then transfers oil and gas to sales pipelines. The oil and gas that's produced on platforms Gina and Gilda in OCS waters offshore of Ventura County. Gilda's gas stream is treated at the facility and then piped to shore. But Gina's gas receives just a little bit of treatment and must be treated further at the facility. And in addition to that gas stream, that the gas that goes into the amine plant includes what's called flash gas, gas that releases during the separation of oil and water at the facility. So the flash gas goes into the amine plant along with vapor recovery that comes from the oil and water storage tanks at the facility. All tanks are required in the oil and gas production to be under vapor recovery, so nothing goes out to atmosphere. So all of these 3 gas streams now go into the amine plant. And once these piping additions are made, these 3 streams will be able to be merged with the Gilda gas stream and blended, and then both will be able to be sold. And along with that, the amine plant will be able to be shut down. So why? I mean, the question that comes up is, why is this flare out of compliance? It really comes down to the flare is oversized for the volume of gas, that's the volume of tail gas that's coming out of the amine plant. Our offshore oil and gas rates have declined, I'd say about a 20% decline in the last year. And the amount of tail gas being generated in this amine plant is below basically the design of this flare. So we've already put in a deionized water injection system into the flare. The flare's been already changed to lower emissions, and there's not much else that we can really do except for now, shut the system down while we have low oil and gas production rates. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to Bob and Emily to talk a little bit more about the process piping changes that we're recommending or we're planning to do.
Thank you. Do other petitioners wish to comment?
Yes, sir. Bob Garcia, Operations Manager, DCOR. And I wanted to turn your attention after the description that Christine gave you to the P&IDs or the drawings that we submitted to you. I think you've got a copy of those. P&IDs, they're actually, I'm just going to reference the last 4 numbers of the P&ID. It's 0101 and 0102. And what they depict and what we've done there is to highlight the flow of what we call the flash gas from our process vessels at Mandalay. And as it carries forward, that flow from the process vessels on 101 to drawing 102 shows that flash gas, which then commingles with what we call vapor recovery gas off our vapor recovery compressors, and is then flows and mixes with gas that comes in from our Gilda platform, and actually is then blended and would be sold as PUC gas. So that's our plan, and you can see that we're going to be bypassing, in this mode, we would be bypassing the ground flare that is currently being used. So that's the plan going forward. That's our remediation plan to deal with the flare problem. And if there's any questions, I'll open it up to you.
Do any members of the board have any questions for the petitioner? Dan?
Right.
Yeah, just to kind of understand how all this works, from kind of reading the order and the introduction given us by the district. That my understanding that the tail gas doesn't burn at high enough in order to eliminate, at temperature, to eliminate the NOx emissions, that you need to add supplemental gas in order to get it up to 1,400 degrees in order to get it to burn high enough temperature to eliminate the NOx. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is exactly correct. There is supplemental fuel that is added to the tail gas stream in the flare so that the heating value of the combined gas will actually burn at 1,400 degrees or higher. And what's actually a benefit from this project that we're planning is that once the flare is shut down, that supplemental fuel, which is actually PUC quality gas, sales gas, can also be sold. And then additionally, shutting down the flare will reduce emissions at the facility from both the flare, and also we have an amine reboiler, which is a burner that will be shut down. So it's kind of a win-win-win all around, to make this change, and it's going to result in more gas being able to be sold, which, is a benefit, I guess, to the local,
Yeah. What I'm going on is to understand a little bit about in the interim and what's leading up to the necessity here. That right now, that what's going into the system is 35,000 cubic feet per day of the tail gas and 30,000 cubic feet per day of the supplemental.
That is correct.
Okay. And prior to that, in the past, now you've had a 20% reduction. So in the past, you had more than 35,000 feet of the tail gas and less of the supplemental fuel?
No, we pretty much stay pretty consistent on our supplemental fuel. The lowest it can be is like 30,000, and then maybe as high as maybe 40, in that range. So the supplemental fuel is fairly consistent. But right now we have such low tail gas rates that with the addition of that supplemental fuel, the combination and that equipment, the flare design, will not allow us to meet the required NOx limits.
That's what I'm trying
So
to figure out.
Yeah.
That as the amount of tail gas decreases, NOx increases.
Mm-hmm.
Why does NOx increase when the tail gas decreases?
Well, sir, one of the things that we have to deal with this flare is that it's a natural draft flare. It's not a forced draft. So a lot of how the air-fuel mixture is determined is essentially by just natural draft. So we don't have as much control on the air-fuel mixture as we would with a forced draft unit. And so based on the fuel mixture going into the flare determines that NOx value, the way it burns in the chamber, the temperature within the heating chamber itself, the combustion chamber. And we just have a hard time controlling that at lower tail gas rates, which increase the amount of supplemental fuel, burns a little hotter, and causes a problem. It doesn't give us the right mix on an air fuel basis to
My
meet your
understanding
NOx.
is you aren't increasing the supplemental fuel, but you will have percentage of supplemental fuel that is then increased. But I'm trying to understand why that increases NOx.
Well, it burns.
Does supplemental fuel have more NOx than tail gas?
It's combustion temperature. The inerts going into the tail gas, or that comprise the tail gas, help us lower the heating value of the gas. And since we
Say
have
that
less
again.
of that, the more tail gas that goes into the unit helps us lower the mix of the fuel, the heating value of the fuel, so it burns not as hot as if it was just all supplemental gas. So the more
Okay.
tail gas you put in helps reduce the heating value and therefore the combustion temperature inside the flare unit.
But then if you increase the supplemental gas, wouldn't that raise it back up?
If the ratio changes of tail gas, then the heating value of that mix then goes up, which increases the temperature, the burning temperature within the flare.
I'm still not understanding why that increases NOx.
It's a function of temperature and air fuel mix. You want to add to that, Emily?
So NOx is generated through combustion.
Yeah.
And so the nitrous oxides that comes from air, the nitrogen that actually just comes from air. And because of the ratio, the higher ratio of supplemental fuel to tail gas, we're just creating more NOx because it's burning at a hotter temperature. And when we have more tail gas and more CO2 in that tail gas, that actually cools the combustion temperature such that we generate less NOx in combustion.
Okay, not sure I'm totally grasping it, but good enough. But you knew, you had to have known for a while that your tail gas was decreasing, and therefore your NOx would be increasing. How long ago did you foresee that you were going to have to make this change in the piping?
Well, we didn't foresee that we had to make a change in the piping until very recently. But what we did do is we have a deionized water injection system installed on this flare. And in the past, we've only ran it while it was in this bypass mode, not the tail gas mode, but the bypass flash gas mode. And that system has misters of deionized water and the combustion zone, and it will cool the combustion temperature to lower the NOx levels. It actually works really well. So we started that system up in the tail gas mode at the beginning of this year. We went through the permitting process with Ventura County to get it to be operational. As late as May, I know May 3rd, we were getting ready for the source test, and we have our own NOx analyzer, and so we went and checked the emissions, or actually May 2nd, sorry, and we were in compliance, with our, and it wasn't an official source test, but it was a check. So we thought we were in pretty good shape. What has happened since May 2nd is we had actually a further reduction in our tail gas generation. So after the fact, we've looked back and seen that. So now we've come up with a plan to bypass the amine system altogether. Do you want to add something, Emily?
Just to clarify, so on May 2nd, the tail gas rate was almost double what it was on the day of our source test. So there was a substantial decrease between May 2nd and June 13th.
So the foreseeability of this, did you foresee that the production was going to decrease this much, or is that a surprise? What's the surprise here?
It was a surprise. We didn't anticipate such a sharp drop in the amount of tail gas that was being produced off of our production. Our production is declining. We've also seen some wells that have declined significantly. Yes, it kind of caught us by surprise here. We didn't anticipate such a large decrease in tail gas. I think we could have forecasted it a little bit better, obviously, if we knew that it was taking a gradual decline, and we could have anticipated when we would have reached this point, but we couldn't in this case. It happened so quickly.
Okay.
And no specific well was lost during that time, so it wasn't, we didn't have a clear indication that we were having this sharp decrease.
I had Dan's concern except with a slightly different twist on it. I associate NOx with high combustion temperature. But, so is the combustion temperature going up now because of the change in the ratio of the gases that you're burning off?
Yes, sir. That was what was happening. So we were
Because there's less gas and more oxygen?
less tail gas, which was increasing the heating value of the gas mix, which included supplemental fuel, which caused the combustion temperature to go up.
Okay.
So if we increase tail gas, the ratio or the mix of the fuel, its heating value would go down, which would cause a lower combustion temperature.
So you'll burn off some constituents, but you'll produce more NOx using the current. Is that?
The higher the heating value and the higher combustion temperature
Right.
within the flare creates more NOx.
Okay.
And the way we would offset that is if we had more tail gas, more inerts, that would drive the heating value down of the total fuel going into the flare.
Got it.
So that's the direct correlation between combustion temperature and heating value of the gas.
Right. Thank you.
One
One more question.
One more, just again, for my ignorance. If you just were burning tail gas only, that wouldn't work. Why?
It wouldn't necessarily work because tail gas is mostly CO2 inerts that are really not combustible. So that wouldn't work. We always have to add some fuel to incinerate, to burn.
So if it doesn't combust, there's no way of just saying, okay, well, the non-combusted stuff we'll take to a landfill?
Well, there's some residual hydrocarbons in that mix, so we have to deal with those. And it's carryover from the tail gas, from the amine process that creates this tail gas. This is the best way we know to deal with those constituencies.
It's about 60% carbon dioxide, and then the rest is hydrocarbon.
Stephen? You're on.
Yeah, I have some questions and comments, but just before I start, would it help to clarify some of these questions? I'm not an expert in this, but my understanding is that there's kind of a sweet spot of temperature above 1400 to get rid of the hydrocarbons, and if you get up above 1700 or so, you start making extra CO2. I mean, extra NOx. And so that's the range you want to be in. Yeah. I don't know if I have that quite correct, but that's the general idea. That you're, I'm looking at the petition. You have a copy of your petition?
Do you have a page number?
Yeah, it's page 4, the section G. This, my general comment on this is, I mean, I'm a scientist, but to tell you the truth, I couldn't make much sense out of this paragraph. There's two questions. One is, what is the equipment used for? And then that's answers is to combust tail gas from the amine unit, CO2 and H2S removal. That is part of the natural gas treatment system and so forth. And the second question is, why is it necessary for the operation of your business? And then you answer that by saying it must remain in operation through maybe platform Gina and Gilda. The rest of it, I think, is not relevant to this petition. You're only petitioning to be allowed to continue to operate the flare in variance of your permit during this interim variance period. Is that correct? Your petition is to continue out to operate this out of compliance flare during the period of this interim variance.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And you plan on continuing to run the flare and the amine unit during the period of this variance?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the rest of this talks about your changes in general, I think. So it's not, even though it's informative, it's not relevant to this limited petition. Is that correct?
That's correct. It defines the endpoint where what we're trying to achieve to end this period.
Okay. I'm looking at section H, which starts on the same page. I think I generally understand this. I guess I'd like to take a little issue with your slightly elevated NOx. These are all small numbers, 0.06 and 0.07, but you're exceeding your permit by over 25% for NOx. So to me, that's not slight. If I go to item I, so did I hear correctly? Was it Ms. White?
Yes?
You said that your production has been reducing or has reduced about 20% over the past year?
That's
Is that
correct.
something like that? This kind of follows on to the question that I think Mr. Murphy asked is, I understand you put the DI water unit in, but couldn't you or shouldn't your technical staff have been able to predict that the flare was operating inefficiently for NOx? I know that's why you put in the DI water unit, but
Yeah, we were actively working on that. I mean, I personally have never seen a lower operating limit for that flare, in any technical documents, but I think we've found the lower operating limit of that flare, through this process.
okay.
That's the best way I can answer that.
My next comment, again, is not possibly germane to this limited petition, but it appears to me that when you eventually get rid of the amine unit and the flare, overall you're going to be producing more NO2 and more H2S, and you're diluting those numbers with the produced gas from, is it Gilda? But overall, somewhere in the system, the SoCal gas service area, there's more NO2, NOx, and H2S being released somewhere, even if it's not at your facility. Do I have that?
Well, just to clarify your question or comment, we intend to take what would have been processed gas, the flash gas and the VRU gas, vapor recovery gas, we would run that gas through what's called H2S scrubbing vessels.
That's not happening now?
It is happening now with our tail gas, yes. And before the tail gas goes to the flare, it is scrubbed of H2S through these vessels.
But
And that
somewhere
would-
in your petition, it says that the flare destroys NOx and H2S.
The amine plant removes the CO2 and H2S from the gas stream. That tail gas then goes through H2S removal vessels, and then the resulting mostly CO2 and a little bit of hydrocarbons then goes to the flare.
So there's no H2S in that stream that goes to the flare? Zero?
Very little, if any.
We have
I think
there's a permit limit of the H2S level that goes to the flare is 7 ppm or below, and we have a continuous H2S monitor, and it goes through the H2S scrubbing vessels before it goes to the flare. There's a lead and a lag vessel.
Right, but the H2S, some of that 7 ppm gets destroyed in the flare now. Is that my understanding?
I would assume so, yeah. Yes.
And that H2S is now going to go into the Southern California gas service area gas.
Well, it's not
That-
always 7 ppm. It's oftentimes
Okay.
0 ppm after it goes through those vessels.
Okay.
The SoCal Gas Company spec is 2 ppm H2S. So in order to sell the gas, we will have to be 2 ppm or lower. They have a detection system on their pipeline, and if we exceed that, it automatically shuts down our sales gas outlet. So it's pretty well controlled by the SoCal Gas Company. So we have to remove the H2S below 2 ppm in order to sell our gas.
And I just want to clarify something. You mentioned NOx. We would also be blending NOx into the sales gas, but NOx is not generated until the flare. So when we take the flare out of operation, we will not be generating NOx.
You're right, sorry. It's, again, beyond the scope, I think, of this permit, but you're making some pretty serious changes, and what you propose, is that going to all be covered without any modifications to your existing permit? And you can take the flare out of the tail gas mode operation and still be,
Yeah, yes, that is correct. There shouldn't be any changes to our air permit.
but the permit now talks about the limit when it's being operated in the tail gas mode.
That's correct.
So when you say you don't operate in the tail gas mode, then that part of the permit is just kind of moot?
Well, we plan to leave the equipment permitted so that in the future, if the oil and gas production rates increase and there's adequate tail gas, or there's enough gas to run the amine plant and go to the flare, we might be able to start it up. And we proposed to Ventura County APCD that we would conduct an emission source test within a certain amount of time, maybe 30 days of startup. We would notify them, and we'd have to do the test.
When you, how long ago did you install the DI unit?
It was operational at the beginning of the year, but it was installed many years ago.
Operation,
Yeah.
Did you need a permit to make that change?
Yes, we
A
did.
permit change?
Yeah.
Did you,
Yeah,
did you source test the flare after the change was made?
we
After the DI unit was added?
there wasn't a requirement to immediately do that, but we did it in anticipation of our June source test. We knew we had a June source test.
Okay.
I mean, we did. I think I told you we used our NOx analyzer our own NOx analyzer, and we tested the emissions from the flare.
And your own, whatever it is, unit never showed variance? I mean, it never showed an excess emission? above the .06?
Well, I did know that the day before the test, I did check it, and it was exceeding it.
Okay.
So, but just so you know, you can't cancel a test. It's in your permit. You have to go forward with it.
Well, I guess I'm concerned. I'd like to be convinced that you weren't operating, thinking you probably were not in compliance, but you thought you'd wait until the source test to verify that. And I'd like to be convinced that that's a concern I shouldn't have, but I haven't.
When Ms. White stated as late as May 2nd, the month prior to our source test, we collected data and determined that we were compliant. And between May 2nd and June 13th, our tail gas rate was cut almost in half. And so that was the difference.
Okay, thank you. A question over in item B3. I think that's on page 7. I'm not understanding, and this same question comes up in the draft order. I'm not understanding why, if the GINA process, GINA is the one that meets everything, or is it Gilda?
The Gilda gas stream is treated, the gas stream from Gilda is treated offshore.
Okay, so.
But the oil production that comes in from Gilda and GINA, the oil production comes in the pipeline. It goes through further oil and water separation in these heater treater vessels, and there's breakout of gas in that process, and that's called the flash gas. And that flash gas stream has to go somewhere. It can't be sold to the pipeline. It has to be treated, and right now it's directed to the amine plant, along with the vapor recovery gas from the storage tanks at that facility. So in order to keep producing oil and gas from both Platform Gilda and Platform GINA, the oil storage tanks, the water storage tanks, and the amine plant need to be operational at this time in order to sell the gas.
I understand. I didn't understand why Gilda had to be shut down. But you
Well,
explained that.
yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Again, I'll take issue with what's in your petition. I think, to me, a failed flare test on June 13th and a filing a petition on July 27th after a notice of variation isn't shortly after, and it isn't timely.
Well, we have to wait till we receive the official source test results from the company, Eros Environmental. They actually take the gas sample of the tail gas, and they take the produce the supplemental fuel, and they crunch their numbers from the results of the emission source testing, and we do not get the official results. And I got them on July 24th.
Really?
And that's the day that I called the district to let them know that we had our results.
Okay.
So, and then within 3 days, we had the petition written and submitted to the air district. So that's the timeline.
Okay. Yeah, it's shortly after you found out about it, but 5 or 6 weeks after the test.
That's correct.
not-
Usually it's a 45-day period between the test and when the results have to be submitted.
Okay, I think that's it for me for now.
Dr. Carmen, do you have any questions?
Yes, but it's Mr. Carmen. I only got a master's degree, never got a doctorate. Mine is explanations for things that I don't understand too well. You know, it's, you say you're going to use this vessel to remove the H2S now and getting rid of the amine plant and the flare. Why won't you need a flare when you have this system compared to what we have now that we need a flare?
Let me see if I understand your question, but I think what you're saying is, or asking, is that we have an amine plant now that removes H2S, And we also have vessels secondary to that that remove H2S. And the reason why we have both is really tied in with all gas processing, number one. But number two is on the tail gas, since we were limited by permit to be at, I believe it was 7 ppm or less on the gas going to the flare, we had to take measures to ensure that we reduced the H2S level in the tail gas to that level or less.
So it won't be necessary when you have this system with the vessels to,
When we go to this other mode that we're describing to you, we'll still have to treat the flash gas and the vapor recovery gas. Instead of it going to the amine plant to remove the H2S, it'll now go directly to these other vessels that we have to remove H2S, and then that combined stream would then be blended in with our basically our PUC gas, sales gas, that is then sold to SoCal Gas.
and how do you ship the gas from the vessels to the shore? From the vessel, you have a pipes or?
Yes, the gas comes from the platforms via pipeline. We compress at the platforms, raise the pressure, and then run the gas through pipeline to our Mandalay facility.
Okay. And I do a lot of water engineering, and we always put sleeves and pipes and things like that. Could we put a sleeve inside the flume and to go ahead and give it more velocity to your flame, so you go out faster and you won't have that much problem?
Well, all of these facilities are legacy facilities that date way back to when they were first installed back in this case for the Gilda Gina Mandalay facility, it dates back to the early 80s, 1980s or so. And the pipelines we have are fixed. We haven't changed them. We deal with the volumes that we deal with now. We either boost our compression or allow for that volume of gas to be transported, and we size our compression accordingly so that it can transport that volume to shore and maintain pressure.
Oh.
We have to run that gas through process, which takes motive pressure to get through all the systems. Every time we go through a vessel or pipe, what have you, there's going to be a pressure drop. And not to get too technical here, but basically we just have to get it through the system and finally to sales.
Okay. The ionizer water injection that you have, that you put at the flare, what exactly does it do to the flame that it reduces the nitrogen oxide?
It cools the temperature, the chamber temperature, which then reduces the NOx production.
So maybe it would be something from quantum mechanics that changes atoms and things like that. So it's as simple as that. Good. And lastly, I have this thing here on this page that it says, this is in the first copy of the discussions, what they have of the amount of excess nitrous oxide was 0.0156 per million BTUs input. And then it says that this one will give you 0.3 pounds per hour. Well, actually, it's 0.37. It's closer to 0.4. And then it says, and 0.595 pounds per day. How do you come from 0.3 pounds per hour to 0.595 pounds per day?
That's a typo.
Yeah, that's a typo. We talked to Chris about it. It should be 0.03.
Oh, Chris. Okay, we'll let it go this time, Chris.
Good eye.
Yeah.
Well, you know, the thing, I don't know if people here realize how bad nitrogen oxide is. Nitrogen oxide is about 300 times worse than CO2. So although you produce a little bit excess there, I made some calculations for my own entertainment, And I found that this amount of nitrogen give you about 434 tons per year of CO2 if you were going to convert it to CO2. And that's enough to, that 100 cars can produce in a year. So so we have some parameters of what we're working with.
Mr.
Well, I mean, the good news is, I'm not sure I agree 100% with your calculations, but the good news is.
Oh, I'll show you my
when we
calculations. no
Yeah,
problem.
but when we shut this system down, then there won't be any emissions from the flare.
Yeah.
So it'll be going in the right direction.
And how long will it be before you do these changes?
Yeah, that's a good question. We didn't go over the schedule. As of this point in time, the piping additions have been planned out. The materials have been ordered. When they arrive, then they're going to need to be painted. We're expecting maybe a September 1st start date on that construction or installation. We've given ourselves some extra time because we don't know if we'll run into any problems during the installation. But the district said make sure you give yourself enough time. So we've put till February 1st of next year. That would be the very last date. But we're expecting it to be hopefully considerably sooner than that. Maybe in the next month or two.
This is a question for Dan Searcy. Dan, does the county has any ideas of how fast you want this thing to be done or to hold them to certain dates?
Well, I'm certainly, I'm okay with February, although I'd like to see it be sooner. There's an incentive to get this project done because once they reconfigure the piping, they're going to burn a lot less gas. They're going to be able to sell that gas instead of just burning it. That's part of the problem. This tail gas from the flare doesn't burn very well, so they have to take perfectly good gas that they could sell and burn it in the flare so they can burn the tail gas. So it's really in their interest, and ours too, to have them complete this piping so that gas that they would normally flare every day isn't going to be flared. The only time they'll operate the flare would be if there's an upset or a shutdown on the platforms or something. Then they would operate the flare. So they're actually they're going to use a lot. They're going to flare a lot less gas. So we're fine with that. And I know things take time. And what I tell people is, don't make your schedule so tight that if one thing happens, you're not going to be able to make it. I mean, these types of piping they have to have done, whether it be piping in this case or in another case, if it's some sort of a control device, it's not something that you can go down to Lowe's and buy. I mean, it's something that has to be manufactured for every time, and there are manufacturing lead times, and sometimes there are problems that are beyond your, like if you want to have something manufactured and the company calls you and tells you that there's a shortage of a certain size pipe or tubing or whatever, it's going to take them a while, So we always like to see a little bit of extra time built in so that they don't put themselves in a spot where they're not going to be able to make the schedule. And so it's a little bit of a dance, you don't want to make it so long that, that they could do it in half the time, but,
Are you going to put him a date or something? Or?
Well, we didn't put an end date in this order because this order, if your board approves it, will expire November 5th. So there's an anticipated end date that is beyond the length that this order will be valid. We will have a lot more firm dates when we come back to do the regular order.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Carmen, I'd just like to try and clarify something. I think nitrous oxide, and N2O, is a very, very strong greenhouse gas, much stronger than both methane and CO2. But NOx is not, and NOx is what we're talking about here. So,
Excuse me?
N2O, nitrous oxide, laughing gas, is a very strong greenhouse gas.
Yeah, yes.
But it's not produced significantly in this flare. It's the NOx, like NO2, that's produced in the flare. And so I think the greenhouse gas issue probably goes away, considering that.
Do any board members have any further questions of the petitioner?
Mr. Garcia, you indicated that you weren't planning on operating without the flare and the amine plant during the period of this variance, in response to my question earlier?
No, we will be operating it during this period.
You will not be operating without it? You do not plan to operate without the flare?
Double negative.
That's right, that's correct.
Okay. Would, if the board chooses to, and if the district doesn't have any problems, would you have any problems with including not operating without those as a condition of the variance?
I mean, at some point during the variance hearing, the variance period, we will get all the piping installed, and we will have to shut down the amine plant and the flare in order to blend the gas to sell it. And we have to do that before the variance period is over in order to be in compliance to shut the flare down. So I don't know if we can accept it unless an alternative method is in place, which is the blending of the gas.
But you're not petitioning us to allow you to run without the flare and without the amine unit?
Well, we would like...
You're petitioning us to allow you to run the flare in violation of the permit?
Yes, while we do these piping changes, but once the piping changes are done, we would like to blend that gas. You know, we'd like to shut that system down because there will be we'll have to reroute it into the new piping so that it can be blended and sold. So, and then, I mean, we have to do that to show that we can shut the system down.
Would you have a problem with the condition that says you don't operate without the flare and the amine unit?
Yeah, I think...
When you won't put any tail gas through a non-burning flare?
Well, I think what we could say is we won't run the amine plant without having the flare in operation. Because the amine plant is the treatment, and the tail gas comes out of the amine plant and goes to the flare. So that amine plant can't be in operation without having a flare, a destructive device. But once we shut the amine plant down, then there's not going to be any tail gas generated. Therefore, there will be no reason to run the flare.
So if there's a condition that says you won't run the flare, you won't turn the flare off when there's tail gas running?
That's the way the permit's written now.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's kind of a given. We would be out of compliance of our permit if we ran the amine plant without going to the flare.
You don't have a copy of the permit in front of you, but number 25 basically requires that any vapors, any tail gas has to go through the flare, and if they were to just vent those vapors to the atmosphere, that would be a violation. So we'd be happy to add that to the order, but it is something that is required by their permit conditions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do any board members have further questions of the petitioner? Does the district have any questions for the petitioner? Does the board have any comments or questions for the district other than the ones? Yeah.
Just if we can put this 5 pounds per, what is it now, per day? Or 6 pounds per day? 5.96 pounds per day. Can you, if you know, can you put that in perspective in terms of how much of the permitted inventory of NOx in the county that is?
It's tons per day for the inventory. We actually, we did this for a variance hearing previously where we had some oil loading racks, and it's 0.6 pounds per day, and I don't have the number in front of me, but the countywide inventory is literally tons per day.
Does that include vehicles and stationary sources, or just permitted?
Like I say, I don't have it in front of me. We have an inventory that includes everything that would also include the biogenic, but then we also just have a man-made inventory, and without having the numbers in front of me, I can't say exactly, but it's huge, and this 0.6 pounds per day is a pretty small fraction of that.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question for the district. In G, a nuisance as specified in Rule 51 will not occur. I couldn't help but notice that the distance to the nearest residence was slightly under half a mile. Are you guys okay with that? 0.47 miles?
Yeah, we're fine. I think Oxnard Shores, I think the trailer right along Fifth Street there are probably the nearest residences. Yeah, I don't anticipate us having any problems with that.
Okay. Any further questions board members want to ask the district? Do you guys have anything else? Do any members of the public here tonight wish to testify or comment? Hearing none, I will call the hearing closed. Discussion by the board.
I just moved to, grant the variant, the interim variance as drafted by the district, that I don't perceive anything that needs to be changed from that.
Yeah, I don't see any deal breakers here. Yeah.
I second that.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
You want to call a roll?
Oh, yeah, okay, go ahead.
Board Member Hurlock,
Aye.
Board Member Murphy,
Aye.
Board Member Stubblefield,
Aye.
and Board Member Carmen.
Aye.
Okay, your petition is granted.
Thank you.
Good presentation, thank you.
Can we, does the board have anything for us? I mean, the district have anything for us?
I just had a quick question. Did you want us to add a condition to the order that requires that they use the flare when they operate, or do you want to leave with the permit?
Like you say.
Okay, thank you.
All right, yeah, I have some comments, not outside the hearing, I mean, outside the hearing.
The hearing's closed.
Hearing's closed. Go ahead.
My comment is that you did a pretty good job of synthesizing, the staff did a good job of synthesizing the petition, both in the staff letter and in the draft order, and also in Mr. Michael Powers' cover letter to this, in terms of what it is their petition, what they're requesting. But this petition, as far as I can tell, doesn't ever say, here's what we are petitioning you to allow us to do. And I think it may just be the fault of the form. Maybe it's a fault of my reading, but I don't think that this petition answers that question. What are we asking to be permitted to do. It's sort of in there, but maybe it would be reasonable to add an item to the petition that says the petitioner wants to da-da-da-da-da. Because they say you did a good job synthesizing it, but I went through this thing pretty carefully, and I couldn't find the answer to that question.
Yeah, we generally take what we receive and try to make sure that it answers all the questions and whatever, but we could certainly do a better job at making sure that it's clear.
One of the things that Mr. Herlock brought up, it would be nice sometimes we see, like we have in this .017 or whatever it is, increase, et cetera, but we really don't have any way to conceptualize what the county thing is. If in your write-ups before to us, if we would have some way of you saying this is the, explaining to us the effect of this percentage-wise on the counties. I don't know how you do it, but you know what I'm getting at.
Yes, we do have numbers that we can use. Now they're, I don't know exactly how accurate those numbers are, but they're numbers that I got from staff whose job is to look at the inventory for the entire county, and we have used those in the past. I'll just make it a point to always have those numbers with me whenever we have a hearing, so we can at least put it into some kind of a perspective.
If I can find an intern and ask him or her to go through all the petitions and add up all the permitted emissions by category.
Yeah, or something for a comparison, like a car gives out this many NOxes per day, and this is how many cars it would be, something where we have a concept of what the figure is.
Well, yeah, there was one, I think it was probably the Ventura County Star, and the comparison, or no, it was something else. It was, anyway, the comparison was with the I don't know, I think it was the Walmart gas station was more than this particular, the permitted emission from the Walmart gas station was higher than what we were allowing.
I have a question that I don't know if it's really pertinent to what we've just discussed, but what exactly is it that you have at Mandalay Bay? What is that, where something comes ashore? I heard Mandalay Bay mentioned several times.
We call it our Mandalay onshore treating facility.
Okay.
Mandalay for short. In some cases, we use the acronym MOSF.
So it has nothing to do with Mandalay Bay.
It doesn't have anything to do with Mandalay Bay.
With the NRG site.
It's next door to it, but has nothing to do with it.
Good. Yeah, I know it's a big area, yeah.
Thank you all again.
Yes, thank you for a good presentation.
Thank
It's
you all
interesting, too.
for waiting. I'm sorry, it was an hour and 45 minutes in traffic.
Meeting is adjourned.
Simi Valley.
Oh, yeah, I thousands of
And Chris,
stop
thank
and
you
go
for
all
the
way here.
poster size. Much easier to read.